The sun dipped low over the gleaming city of Velari, the capital of the Zelari Empire, casting long shadows over its spires and bridges. Ships of every shape and size glided through the sky lanes, leaving trails of pale light against the violet-hued sky. Captain Elias Drake stood on the balcony of the human embassy, watching the movement of the city with a mixture of awe and unease. He had been sent here not as a diplomat, but as a military liaison, tasked with understanding the customs of a species far different from his own. Humans were strangers in Zelari space. Their ships were small, their numbers few, and their technology, while effective, was considered crude compared to the alien civilizations around them. Yet Elias had a reputation among his peers, disciplined, clever, and fiercely protective of those under his care. That reputation was about to be tested in a way he could not imagine. The palace where Princess Lyra resided was a vast structure of crystalline walls and towers that seemed to hum with energy. From a distance, it appeared fragile, delicate, and ethereal, yet it was a fortress, designed to withstand any attack. Today, the palace would host a ceremony of immense importance. Representatives from neighboring systems had gathered, and the princess herself would make a speech, reaffirming her people's commitment to peace. Elias had been instructed to observe and ensure security, though he had been warned that interfering directly in Zelari affairs could be catastrophic. He adjusted the strap of his harness and checked the sidearm at his hip. He was a soldier by trade, trained for situations where decisions were made in seconds and actions determined life or death. In this world of ceremonial politeness and intricate rituals, he felt out of place. Yet there was a quiet thrill in knowing that danger could appear at any moment, and he would be ready. The courtyard below was filling with guests. Zelari nobles moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, their elongated limbs and shimmering garments creating a wave of color across the polished floors. Among them, Elias spotted the princess herself. Lyra was smaller than he expected, slender and poised, yet there was a fire in her eyes that spoke of intelligence and courage. Her hair was a cascade of silver, catching the fading sunlight, and her movements were precise, as though every step had been rehearsed 1,000 times. Elias' eyes scanned the crowd, noting the placement of guards, the angles of the walls, and the possible points of attack. Despite the layers of security, something in the air made him uneasy. There was tension beneath the smiles, a sense that not all who had come were there to honor the princess. He didn't know what exactly told him this, but instinct had rarely failed him. The ceremony began with a fanfare that echoed through the courtyard. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly over the crowd as she addressed the gathered dignitaries. Elias kept his gaze sharp, watching for any sign of threat. The words of the speech barely registered in his mind. He was focused on the flow of people, the positions of guards, and the patterns of movement that could conceal an assassin. Then he saw it. A figure, moving with deliberate slowness, making its way toward the princess. At first it seemed like another guest, but the way the person's hand rested beneath a long cloak, the slight tension in their shoulders told him otherwise. Elias' heart pounded. Every muscle in his body tightened. He did not wait to analyze or signal, he acted. In one swift motion, he moved from the balcony and sprinted toward the center of the courtyard. Shouts erupted as guards noticed his sudden movement, confusion spreading like fire. Elias pushed through the crowd, his long legs carrying him faster than any human should have been able to, his eyes locked on the threat. The figure was close now, a glint of metal visible under the cloak. Elias reached the princess just as the assassin lunged. Time seemed to stretch. He didn't think about the consequences, the council's rules, or the diplomatic fallout. He thought only of the immediate need to protect the young woman who, despite being an alien, deserved to live. He shoved himself in front of her. The blade struck him across the shoulder. Pain exploded through his body, sharp and fiery, but he did not falter. The princess cried out, startled, and guards surged forward, surrounding the attacker. Elias felt the world tilt as his legs buckled slightly, but he stayed on his feet, holding the princess behind him. The assassin was quickly subdued, but the moment had already left its mark. Elias sank to one knee, the blood from his wound staining the ceremonial floor. Lyra's eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear, astonishment, and something else, respect perhaps that she did not yet understand. The crowd was silent, unsure of how to react to what had just occurred. In Zelari culture, such an act of protection was rare and deeply significant, especially coming from a human. One of the palace guards rushed forward, supporting Elias as best they could. "He is human," the guard said, voice tight. He saved you." Then in the distance, Elias heard the subtle hum of recognition. The council had taken note. Among the Zelari, saving the life of a royal triggers a sacred code, the life debt tradition. Those who are saved owe their protector a bond of obligation, one that can last a lifetime. For Lyra, this meant that Elias' actions had just created a debt that could not be refused, no matter how unusual it seemed. The princess's hand lingered on his shoulder. I do not know how to repay this. The tradition, it demands more than I can give. Her voice was steady, yet her eyes betrayed uncertainty. Elias shook his head, grimacing as he tried to ease the pressure on his shoulder. You don't need to repay anything. I acted because it was the right thing, that is enough. Yet here was proof that a human had acted with courage equal to that of the fiercest Zelari warrior. The council would not ignore it. Lyra straightened, her silver hair catching the light. If tradition cannot be ignored, she said, then I will honor it. I will repay my debt. I will do what is necessary, whatever it may require. He had protected her once, but the life debt tradition was not merely symbolic. It carried expectations, obligations that could place both of them in danger. He had not anticipated this. His role as a soldier had been simple: protect when needed, act decisively. Now he faced consequences that stretched beyond battlefields into the intricate web of alien politics and customs. As the sun continued to set, the courtyard emptied slowly, the ceremony concluded, but the echoes of the day lingering in every corner. Elias was escorted to the palace infirmary, Lyra walking beside him. Despite the wound in his shoulder, he remained alert, scanning for any further danger. Lyra matched his vigilance, her mind already turning over what the debt would entail, how she might navigate the traditions that bound her. In the quiet moments, as medics tended to his injury, Elias and Lyra spoke in low tones. She asked questions about humanity, about his motivations, about why he risked himself for someone he barely knew. He answered honestly, explaining the human belief in courage, loyalty, and doing what is right even when the consequences are uncertain. Lyra listened intently, her admiration growing. She had been raised in a world where duty and honor were paramount, yet humans approached life differently. Their courage was not bound by codes or expectations. It sprang from choice, from the heart. Elias represented that courage, and in doing so had earned her trust, her respect, and the bond of life debt. The council met late into the night, debating the implications of what had happened. Some argued that humans could not fully understand Zelari tradition and that any debt owed by a princess to a human might create instability. Others saw it as a rare opportunity, a chance to strengthen relations with a species whose courage was now undeniable. Lyra remained firm. She would honor the debt. She would do so not only out of obligation, but out of recognition of the bravery she had witnessed. Elias rested in the infirmary, his shoulder bandaged, his mind restless. He understood that the moment he stepped in front of the blade, his life had changed. He was no longer merely a visitor or a soldier assigned to observe. He was now part of something larger, an interwoven story of duty, honor, and courage that transcended the boundaries of species. The life debt tradition would shape the days ahead, and he would need all his skill, intelligence, and resolve to navigate what was coming. Outside, the city of Velari sparkled under the emerging stars, oblivious to the silent tension that now bound human and princess. Elias looked toward the palace towers, knowing that the debt he had inadvertently accepted was not a burden he could ignore. It was a promise of protection, of guidance, and perhaps of unexpected friendship. Lyra stood at the balcony of her own chamber later that night, gazing at the city below. She thought of the human soldier who had risked everything for her, and of the life debt that now connected them. In her heart, she resolved that she would not simply repay it because tradition demanded it. She would repay it in a way that honored courage, ingenuity, and the bond that had been forged in that fleeting, pivotal moment. And in the quiet of the night, far from the ceremonial grandeur and the whispers of the council, a new chapter began, for the princess, for the soldier, and for the story that would test the limits of honor, friendship, and the human spirit in the galaxy of strangers. The following morning, the palace of Velari was alive with the quiet hum of activity. Courtiers moved gracefully along the halls, their eyes darting occasionally toward Princess Lyra, who now carried a new weight. The life debt tradition, an invisible chain of obligation that bound her to a human soldier, had changed the rhythm of her life. For the first time, she felt the full weight of responsibility, not as a princess answering to her people, but as someone indebted to another's courage. Elias Drake sat in the infirmary, the bandages on his shoulder snug but uncomfortable. He had insisted that the medics clean and dress the wound thoroughly. A sharp pain reminded him with every movement that he had come closer to death than he cared to admit. Yet he refused to lie still. Even injured, he maintained the posture of a soldier, alert and watchful. When the princess entered, Elias looked up, noting the determined set of her shoulders. She carried herself as she always did, calm, poised, controlled, but her eyes betrayed something more: curiosity, concern, and the hint of an understanding that this life debt was not a simple ritual, but a bridge between two very different worlds. "You look better than I expected," Lyra said, her voice quiet but firm. She moved closer, keeping a careful distance as though afraid of disturbing his injury. "I must thank you again, though I am learning that words are not enough. My people will not allow it. I must find a way to repay you, Captain Drake, and it must be in a manner they accept. I've seen too many die because they misunderstood obligations." Both knew that this was only the beginning. The life debt was more than a ceremony. It was a bond that demanded courage, wisdom, and patience. Meanwhile, in the halls of the palace, whispers of Elias' act had spread quickly. Courtiers and guards alike debated the implications of a human stepping in to save the princess. Some considered it audacious, even foolish. Others murmured about courage and loyalty that rivaled the bravest Zelari warriors. No one could deny that a human had acted where many aliens might have hesitated. The council convened shortly after the incident, its members assembling in a chamber of gleaming crystal, their expressions serious and unreadable. Elder Tyrus, a figure known for his sharp mind and unwavering adherence to tradition, spoke first. "A human has saved the life of our princess," he began, his voice measured. "This is unprecedented. The life debt is now activated. She owes him repayment. Our laws demand that this debt be honored in full. Can we truly expect that one of their kind will understand our traditions? This is dangerous. The debt may bind her to a creature who does not share our values. That is a debt I cannot ignore." As the day progressed, Princess Lyra insisted that he be accompanied through the palace by her personal guards, an honor that was also a subtle way of keeping him safe while allowing her to navigate her duties. Together, they walked the corridors, speaking quietly. "I cannot simply ignore this debt," she said, her silver hair catching the light streaming through the tall windows. "My people would never forgive me, but I also will not place you in danger again. You have risked your life, that was enough. That is often more effective than trying to act alone." Guards immediately moved into formation, and Lyra instinctively reached for the communications device at her belt. Elias' instincts kicked in again. He moved toward her, scanning the corridors. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low and firm. The alarm had been triggered by a minor breach in one of the outer courtyards. A scout reported movement, shadows slipping through the perimeter, shapes moving too deliberately to be innocent. The palace had been under constant surveillance by neighboring factions, and Elias suspected immediately that the earlier attempt on Lyra's life might have been part of a larger plot. Together, they made their way to the courtyard, where a team of Zelari guards had already begun to investigate. Shadows moved among the columns, and the faint sound of mechanical devices alerted Elias to the presence of hidden tools, perhaps meant to sabotage or create diversion. Lyra, standing at his side, observed carefully. "The attack was not random," she said. "Whoever sent the assassin is skilled. They are testing us, seeing how we respond." Elias noticed patterns, points where guards converged, areas left temporarily unprotected, and potential blind spots. His mind, trained in battlefield tactics, immediately began to formulate a plan for defense, even within the palace walls. Lyra's gaze remained steady. She had witnessed Elias' courage and judgment firsthand. Despite her people's strict codes, she began to see the value of his perspective, a human approach that was different, flexible, and effective in ways Zelari tradition sometimes overlooked. Hours passed in careful observation, testing, and preparation. The palace seemed calm on the surface, yet beneath it, a tension built that neither human nor alien could ignore. Every corner, every window, every passage was a potential threat. And in the midst of this, the life debt bond became more than symbolic. It was a shared responsibility, a partnership forged in an act of bravery that neither could fully anticipate. That evening, as the sun set once more, Elias and Lyra stood together on one of the palace balconies, overlooking the sprawling city. The events of the day had reinforced something both had already felt. Trust was essential, but courage alone was not enough. Strategy, vigilance, and understanding would determine whether they survived the challenges yet to come. Lyra broke the silence. "I have spent my life preparing for every danger, every challenge," she said, her voice steady. "Yet I never imagined that a human could teach me something new about courage and wisdom. I owe you more than life itself, Captain Drake." The life debt was no longer merely a tradition. It was a bond, a connection that would guide their actions, decisions, and trust. Both recognized that the days ahead would test them, not only against external threats, but against the rigid expectations of the Zelari Council, the shadowy forces that sought to exploit weakness, and the delicate balance between two worlds that had never truly understood each other. As night deepened, the city lights shimmered against the violet sky. The human soldier and the alien princess, bound by courage, trust, and the sacred life debt, prepared for the trials ahead. The first day of danger had passed, but the story was only beginning. Somewhere in the palace, hidden among the corridors, the faint echo of movement suggested that their enemies had not given up. The events that had brought Elias and Lyra together were only the beginning. And for both of them, survival would require more than bravery. It would demand ingenuity, loyalty, and the kind of trust that transcended worlds. Elias adjusted his bandages and looked toward Lyra. "Tomorrow will be another day. We need to plan, to understand what we face, and to anticipate danger before it reaches us. And together we will meet it, for the debt and for the safety of this world and perhaps others as well." In the quiet, both understood something vital. Courage had sparked the debt, but trust and cooperation would sustain it. The galaxy outside Valeri's walls was vast, full of threats, intrigue, and unexpected challenges. And in that galaxy, two unlikely allies had found a purpose together, a purpose that would define not only their lives but the relationship between their species, and the meaning of honor, courage, and humanity itself. The morning air in Valeri was crisp and filled with the soft hum of energy from the city below. From her balcony, Princess Lyra watched the streets awaken, her mind already moving through the list of preparations that awaited her. Today marked the first step in honoring her life debt to Captain Elias Drake. The Council had sanctioned a trial, one meant to test her courage, judgment, and loyalty. It was a tradition among the Zelari, a ritual that bonded those saved to those who had risked life and limb for them. Yet this trial would be different. She was bound not to another Zelari, but to a human whose ways were unfamiliar and whose understanding of their culture was limited. Elias, despite the ache in his shoulder from the previous attack, was already in the training courtyard. He moved with measured steps, adjusting his gear and checking the small devices he had brought from the human fleet. While the Zelari valued skill and discipline, their approach to danger was often ceremonial, rigid, and predictable. Humans, by contrast, were unpredictable, improvisational, and flexible. Elias intended to bring that advantage to the trial. Lyra approached, her silver hair glinting in the morning light. She was dressed in light armor that allowed her to move freely but still signaled her status. Elias turned, offering a faint smile. Despite the sternness of her expression, she radiated determination. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady. "I have no choice," she replied, though her tone was firm rather than fearful. "If I am to honor the debt, I must succeed. I will follow your guidance, Captain, but know this, I will not be a passive participant. Today is about learning to rely on each other, and understanding that courage alone is not enough." Today's exercise was not purely ceremonial. The Council had allowed for a controlled test of strategy, resourcefulness, and cooperation. Lyra would face dangers that would require her to act, think, and adapt, skills that humans excelled at. The path led them through narrow canyons and jagged rock formations. Elias walked ahead, scanning constantly, alert to every shadow and movement. Lyra followed closely, observing his techniques, the way he measured distances, anticipated ambushes, and used natural cover to his advantage. Even in training, his precision was remarkable, a combination of instinct and calculation. As they reached a clearing, the trial escalated. Drones, programmed to simulate enemy combatants, appeared from various directions. They were swift, agile, and armed with non-lethal but realistic devices meant to challenge the princess's ability to react under pressure. Lyra's heart raced, yet she moved with focus, trusting Elias' guidance. "Move to cover," Elias instructed. "Do not stand still. Predict their paths and remember, every choice has consequences." "Your instincts are good," he said quietly, noticing her hesitation before she took a calculated shot to disable a drone. But you anticipate threats too late. Watch the angles, the timing. It's not enough to react, you must foresee. She moved with awareness, anticipating the drone's trajectories and using the environment to her advantage. The gap between human flexibility and alien precision became a bridge rather than a barrier. Hours passed as the trial intensified. Obstacles became more complex, terrain more treacherous, and simulated ambushes more challenging. Elias observed quietly, interjecting only when necessary, allowing Lyra to take initiative and make decisions under pressure. He knew that trust was as vital as skill. A misstep by either of them could end the trial prematurely, or worse, reinforce a failure in cooperation. At midday, they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a valley that was part of the simulation. Below, more drones patrolled, some hidden among the rocks, others moving in coordinated patterns. Elias crouched behind a large outcropping, motioning for Lyra to follow. "See how they move," he whispered. "Notice the patterns. The key is not brute force. It is understanding behavior and using it against them." With careful precision, she directed her actions, coordinating with Elias in a way that surprised even herself. Together, they disabled multiple drones, moving with a rhythm that felt almost organic, a combination of human improvisation and Zelari discipline. The exercise, however, was not purely physical. Along the path, challenges required moral judgment. At one point, holographic civilians were placed in simulated danger, and Lyra had to choose between taking the fastest route to neutralize threats or ensuring the safety of innocents. The decision was complex, designed to test not only skill but character. "I will not sacrifice them for efficiency," she said, her voice resolute. Elias nodded approvingly. Human or alien, the value of life remained paramount. They adjusted their strategy, prioritizing protection without compromising the trial objectives. As the sun began to descend, marking the late afternoon, the trial reached its final stage. A simulated stronghold stood before them, heavily defended by drones in coordinated formations. Lyra and Elias studied it from a ridge above, formulating a plan. They needed to infiltrate, retrieve a symbolic artifact representing victory, and exit without detection. "Speed is critical," Elias said, pointing out the patrol routes. "Distraction, misdirection, and careful timing. Use everything you've learned today." "You are ready." Inside the stronghold, they encountered the final challenge, a series of obstacles requiring both intelligence and quick thinking. One chamber contained pressure-sensitive floors, while another had barriers that could only be bypassed by solving mechanical puzzles. Lyra's Zelari training in logic complemented Elias' improvisational approach. Together, they moved efficiently, disabling traps and unlocking paths. Finally, they reached the artifact, a crystalline emblem glowing softly in the dim light. As Lyra reached out to claim it, a final drone appeared, faster and more agile than any before. Without hesitation, Elias acted, intercepting it in a move that was both protective and calculated. Lyra realized in that instant the depth of human courage, not the bravado of strength alone, but the combination of foresight, skill, and selflessness. With the artifact secured, they exited the stronghold, coordinating their movements to avoid detection. The trial concluded with a simulated extraction, and the instructors monitoring their progress erupted in approval. Lyra's success was undeniable. She had honored her life debt, not merely through adherence to tradition, but through courage, intelligence, and cooperation. Elias had guided her, yes, but she had taken initiative and demonstrated her capability, proving that humans and Zelari could work as equals. As they emerged into the open air, the valley bathed in the glow of the setting sun, Lyra looked at Elias with a mixture of respect and gratitude. "You taught me much today," she said, her voice calm but full of meaning. "I thought I understood courage, but you have shown me that it is more than bold acts. It is choice, strategy, and trust." The council awaited, eager to see the results of the trial. Lyra approached them with the artifact in hand, presenting it with dignity. The elders nodded, their expressions a mixture of approval and cautious respect. Elias remained slightly behind her, observing, ever watchful, yet now with a recognition that his presence had transformed from a source of controversy to a symbol of trust and cooperation. The princess addressed the council. "The trial is complete. I have honored my life debt to Captain Drake. He has taught me much, and I have learned to act with courage, foresight, and strategy. The debt is repaid not as a burden, but as a shared understanding of trust and partnership. I acted when needed, and the princess chose to rise to the challenge. That is what makes this bond meaningful. Ilias had proven that humans could operate not just with strength, but with judgment and insight that transcended the rigid expectations of alien tradition. For both, the day had strengthened their bond. Life debt was no longer a symbolic chain. It was a partnership forged in shared trial, one that promised to face the coming dangers together. And in the galaxy beyond Velari, threats awaited. Aliens, mercenaries, and hidden conspiracies would soon challenge the fragile peace. But for now, Princess Lyra and Captain Ilias Drake had proven that courage, trust, and ingenuity could overcome even the most demanding traditions. They returned to the palace with a quiet understanding. The trials were not over. This victory was only the beginning. And as stars shimmered in the sky above Velari, both knew that humanity's ingenuity and courage had left an indelible mark on the Zelari, one that would resonate far beyond the walls of the palace. The day after the trial, the palace of Velari felt heavier than before. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, yet the halls seemed colder, filled with whispers that followed Princess Lyra and Captain Ilias Drake wherever they went. Though the trial had been a success, it had also drawn attention, some admiring, some wary, and some openly resentful. Ilias had sensed it in the eyes of the council members, in the cautious steps of the palace guards, and in the hushed conversations echoing through the corridors. Lyra walked beside Ilias as they made their way to the council chamber. Despite her success, she felt an unease that no amount of preparation could erase. "Something has shifted," she said quietly. "I can feel it. The council is watching you, me more closely than ever. Some are curious, but others, they are suspicious. I may have saved your life, but that also means I have become a symbol, and symbols can be dangerous." "Captain Drake," Tyrus began, his voice calm yet deliberate, "your actions have placed our traditions in new context. While your courage is undeniable, it has also created complications. The princess's debt to you is clear, but how it is honored may create tension within the council. The debt is her choice to honor, not mine to claim. I intend to offer guidance and support, nothing more. How can we trust that your influence will not sway the princess in ways we cannot foresee?" The council was rarely unanimous and rarely respectful of outsiders. Yet here, the bond formed by life debt was undeniable, and Lyra's authority could not be dismissed. Ilias watched the exchange, understanding the subtle politics at play. In his world, loyalty and trust were earned through action. Here, they were complicated by centuries of rigid custom. He had survived attacks, taught lessons, and now found himself navigating a minefield of alien politics. The council concluded the session with cautious approval, but the tension lingered. Outside the chamber, whispers followed them, hinting at dissatisfaction and hidden plots. Ilias and Lyra both sensed it. Later that day, as they walked through the palace gardens, Lyra turned to Ilias. "The trial showed what we can do together, but it has also revealed enemies. I can feel them watching. The same forces that sent the assassin may still be active. We cannot assume our safety. Only then can we act before they strike again. We need to anticipate their next moves, not simply react." Ilias trained a small team in tactics unfamiliar to the Zelari, blending human improvisation with alien precision. Lyra absorbed every lesson, her analytical mind processing strategy and prediction alongside human instinct. Together, they formed a silent partnership, one built on trust, experience, and the bond of life debt. By evening, the palace seemed calm, yet the quiet was deceptive. From hidden corners, subtle movements suggested that forces loyal to the rebel faction were already in motion. Holographic projections of patrols, security routes, and possible entry points flickered across the planning table as Ilias outlined contingencies. "You must be prepared for deception," Ilias said. "Not all threats are physical. Some come as whispers, lies, or false trust. The challenge is to identify them before they act." Ilias positioned himself in the observation tower, his vantage point covering the grounds and perimeter. Lyra patrolled nearby, blending her role as princess with the vigilance required of one bound by debt. The hours passed slowly, each one a test of patience and alertness. It was shortly after midnight that the first sign appeared. A subtle disturbance along the northern wall caught Ilias' attention, a faint glint, a movement too calculated to be natural. He signaled to Lyra, who adjusted her position, preparing to respond. The intruders moved with precision, attempting to bypass the outer defenses. They were not the mindless mercenaries seen in earlier threats. These were trained, organized, and intent on testing weaknesses. Elia's human instincts told him that confrontation was inevitable. "Prepare yourself," he whispered. "They are probing us. We will intercept them before they reach the inner chambers." Traps and obstacles set by Elias and the palace guards slowed the intruders, giving Lyra and him the advantage. They moved together seamlessly, Lyra using her agility and knowledge of the palace to flank, while Elias anticipated movements, disabling threats before they could become serious. One intruder attempting to breach a secondary gate was caught in a net trap Elias had prepared. Another was lured into a corridor where Lyra's quick reflexes and precise timing immobilized them. The intruders were skilled but unprepared for the combined human-alien strategy. As the engagement concluded, Elias and Lyra stood in the courtyard, surveying the subdued intruders. "This was only a test," Elias said, breathing steadily despite the adrenaline. "They wanted to see our response. Now we know they are organized, patient, and willing to exploit any weakness." Reports of the attempted breach were presented, and the intruders' patterns analyzed. Some council members expressed concern about the human captain's role, fearing that his methods were unorthodox and potentially disruptive. Yet others acknowledged the effectiveness of the combined strategy. Elder Tyrus spoke, his tone measured. "Captain Drake has demonstrated skill, foresight, and loyalty. The princess has honored her debt not only in courage, but in judgment and action. While some may question human methods, the results are clear. Cooperation has prevented disaster. The debt binds the princess to him, yes, but can we ensure that this bond does not create further challenges? That is how the debt is honored, through partnership, not obedience." As evening approached, the palace was alive with preparation for increased security. Guards were briefed, observation posts reinforced, and strategy meetings held in anticipation of further attempts by the rebel faction. Lyra and Elias worked closely, blending their knowledge, instincts, and judgment to create a defense that was both disciplined and flexible. Later, in a quiet moment on the balcony, Lyra turned to Elias. "We have survived the first test," she said, "but I can feel that the challenges ahead will be greater. The life debt binds me, yes, but it also inspires me. I will not allow my people or my protector to face harm because of this tradition. Together, we will meet whatever comes. Courage brought us here, but foresight and trust will carry us forward. This is more than a life debt. It is a partnership, and partnerships endure." The trials had tested skill, courage, and judgment. The life debt had strengthened their bond, and the galaxy beyond awaited, filled with both peril and opportunity. In that moment, Elias understood something vital. Humanity's greatest strength was not just in bravery or skill, but in the ability to adapt, trust, and act with intelligence in the face of danger. Lyra understood that tradition could guide, but courage and partnership could redefine it. Together, they were ready to face what the universe would throw at them, whatever it might be. The sun rose over Velari, casting warm light across the palace spires. The city seemed calm, peaceful, almost unaware of the storm approaching, but inside the palace walls, tension was thick. Princess Lyra and Captain Elias Drake moved swiftly through the halls, preparing for what they knew would be the final test. The rebel faction that had tried to assassinate Lyra before was no longer hiding in the shadows. They had gathered strength, and their plan to destabilize the palace and overthrow the princess was now clear. Elias adjusted the strap on his sidearm, checking the small gadgets he had brought from the human fleet. His shoulder, still tender from the first attack, did not slow him. Pain had become secondary to focus. Today, he would need every ounce of skill, every instinct, and every lesson he had shared with Lyra to protect her and the palace from disaster. Lyra stood beside him, calm and resolute. Her armor glimmered in the morning light, silver and intricate, a reflection of her status and preparedness. She carried herself with the poise of a ruler but the sharp focus of someone who understood the dangers ahead. The life debt she owed Elias had grown beyond obligation. It had become a bond of trust, strategy, and mutual protection. "We need to split our focus," Elias said quietly, pointing to the palace map projected on a hollow screen. "The rebels have infiltrated from multiple points. Some will attempt to breach the northern walls, others will move through the service corridors to reach the throne room. We cannot predict all of it, but we can anticipate patterns and set traps. We will coordinate with the guards, but I will also take an active role. I cannot simply hide behind tradition or protocol. My people need me, and so does the palace." Elias worked tirelessly, combining human improvisation with Zelari discipline to create layers of defense. Lyra absorbed everything, her analytical mind working to anticipate movements and counter strategies. Together, they had become a team that balanced instinct with precision. As afternoon approached, the first signs of the attack appeared. Shadowy figures moved along the perimeter, attempting to test defenses. A series of alarms echoed through the palace, and guards moved quickly to intercept the intruders. Elias and Lyra were ready. The rebels struck in coordinated waves, attempting to overwhelm the guards and create diversions. Drones and automated traps slowed them, but some managed to advance through less guarded corridors. Elias and Lyra moved as one, anticipating every move, adjusting tactics in real time. Lyra's agility and knowledge of the palace layout complemented Elias' foresight and experience. One corridor brought them face to face with a small group of armed intruders. Lyra acted first, ducking behind a support column and using a low-energy stun device to immobilize one of the attackers. Elias covered her, intercepting another with precise timing, disabling the weapon without unnecessary harm. The rebels were skilled but not prepared for the coordinated strategy of human and Zelari working together. "We need to prevent them from reaching the inner chambers," Elias said. "If they breach the throne room, the palace is vulnerable. Lead the way, Lyra." "I'll follow and cover you." At the central courtyard, the rebels attempted a final push. Their leader, a tall figure clad in dark armor, stepped forward, directing the attack with precision. Elias recognized the tactics immediately. These were not mindless mercenaries, but a trained force capable of complex strategy. "Stay close," Elias whispered. "I'll handle the leader. You focus on securing the courtyard and protecting the civilians." Elias' human ingenuity and adaptability allowed him to counter the leader's strikes, using misdirection and speed rather than brute force. Each movement was calculated, exploiting weaknesses in the opponent's style. Lyra acted simultaneously, using her knowledge of the palace and agility to intercept other intruders. Civilians hiding in the courtyard were guided to safety by her quick thinking and clear commands. Her movements were swift, precise, and unwavering, reflecting the lessons she had learned in the earlier trial. The battle intensified. The rebel leader unleashed a series of coordinated attacks, but Elias anticipated them, redirecting force and neutralizing the threat without unnecessary harm. Lyra's coordination with the palace guards created a bottleneck, limiting the rebels' ability to advance. Slowly, the tide turned. Finally, the leader attempted a direct strike at Elias, aiming to take him down quickly. At the same moment, Lyra intercepted another intruder attempting to flank Elias. Elias used the leader's momentum against him, a move based on human training in leverage and anticipation. The leader was disarmed and immobilized. The remaining rebels, witnessing their leader defeated and outmaneuvered, surrendered. The palace guards secured the area, ensuring no further threats remained. The courtyard, once a scene of potential disaster, was now safe, a testament to the combined skill, courage, and coordination of human and princess. Lyra approached Elias, her armor slightly scuffed, her breathing steady but deliberate. "We did it," she said. "The palace is secure and the threat is neutralized." It was a test of trust, strategy, and partnership. You honored your life debt not through ceremony alone, but through action, courage, and wisdom. Together, we have proven what humanity and Zelari can achieve when they work as equals. The actions of the princess and Captain Drake have prevented disaster and preserved the integrity of the palace. Their courage, judgment, and cooperation are commendable. Tradition has been honored, yet innovation has strengthened our security. The captain's presence, while unconventional, has proven effective. The balance of trust and strategy has preserved both life and tradition. The debt is fulfilled, not through obligation alone, but through partnership. As the council concluded, the palace exhaled, releasing the tension that had held it tight for days. Guards returned to their posts, the citizens were assured of safety, and Lyra's authority was reinforced not only by birthright but by her actions. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Lyra and Elias walked together. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. The day's events had forged a bond stronger than tradition or obligation. Life debt had begun as a duty, but now it was trust, respect, and a shared understanding of courage and purpose. "You risked everything for me," Lyra said softly, "and I owe you more than words can convey, but today I feel that the debt has transformed. It is no longer about repayment." It is about partnership, trust, and mutual respect. Humans and Zelari together. The palace, once threatened, now stood as a symbol of courage, ingenuity, and partnership between human and Zelari. The trials had tested strength, judgment, and loyalty. The life debt, once a chain of obligation, had become a bridge, one built on trust, action, and shared purpose. For both Elias and Lyra, the journey had only begun. The galaxy held unknown dangers, conspiracies, and challenges, yet they faced them with the certainty that courage, cooperation, and ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. Humanity had proven its worth not only in strength, but in wisdom and trust, and the bond between human soldier and alien princess would endure, shaping the future of both their worlds. As they stood together in the quiet of the gardens, the gentle hum of the city below, both knew that life debt had become far more than tradition. It had become a promise, a partnership, and a testament to the power of courage, intelligence, and trust. The galaxy was vast, and challenges awaited, but together they were ready for whatever came next.